We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Rev Nathaniel W Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Brother Blackwell. Let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, certainly never good night, and never ever goodbye, because I hate goodbye. It's something I lost in childhood. My name is Pastor Nathaniel W Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles. And the name of this offering that we're doing this afternoon is entitled, It's Time. And well, may you ask, what is it time for? And the response, of course, is it's always time for justice. That means environmental, health, and always economic justice. Those, not to mention housing. But economic justice always brings us smack up against the need for making whole, doing reparations to make whole and to repair those citizens of these United States that have been injured intentionally and deliberately, whether consciously or unconsciously, by the United States government. And especially I'm talking of the slaveocracy that existed in this country for over almost 250 years, and then another 100 years of sanction, Jim Crow, yes, sanctioned by government fiat, sanctioned by government law, sanctioned by government code, whether it was local or county or state or federal. As a matter of fact, the biggest injustice done following on the heels of slavery was the huge injustice done to the American public, and more especially the black portion, or the colored portion, or the Negro portion of that so-said American public that was excluded from the housing, excluded from the Homestead Act and the like. Going back, of course, to the issue of the first sin, second sin, really. The first was the genocide against the first peoples, First Nations that were here when the so-called pilgrims from Europe came upon the shores here in Virginia and New England, and systematically and cold-bloodedly massacred and did their best to exterminate the first peoples from the land. And having been unsuccessful in doing that, they restricted first peoples, of course, to reservation. That is the number one sin. It's ongoing, needs to be rectified. The second is like unto it, where they kidnapped and stole people from a foreign land, a land not their own, and secreted them in the holds of ships as though they were so much flotsam and jetsam and cargo to be spaced 18 inches apart. And these ships were then underwritten, of course, by the insurance companies formed for that very same purpose, and getting into the minutia of the slave business, of the transportation of peoples from other shores, especially from the shores of the continent of Africa, and bringing them through the Middle Passage with the loss of many souls, many people thrown overboard as mere cargo, as a mere commodity left to drown in the depths of the briny sea. And those that were brought here had no brighter prospect than long rows of cotton. I need not go back over the litany of this nation's continued crime and criminal enterprise by which this country, this nation, was built. After all, it was cemented, it was given access in the founding documents. The very Constitution speaks of persons held to service or labor, and as such persons being equated as only being worth 3/5 of a person, 3/5 of a person. Not that they weren't human beings, but that they were 3/5 of a person. And remembering that Black's Law Dictionary of that day said that a slave was a human being who, according to the law, was not a person but a thing. That being said, we know that there must be, therefore, be reparations if this great nation is to indeed remain a great nation, and it is to improve and is to survive. It cannot, as Abraham Lincoln so eloquently spoke prior to the Civil War, this nation cannot survive half slave and half free. We must become all one or all the other. And that question, that prospect, even in this modern and technological age in which we now live, still looms before us, because you have 140 families owning more wealth than everybody else here in the United States of America, and indeed in the world. So we're headed toward destruction. We're headed toward revolution, and they're building prisons as fast as they can. But I don't feel that those prisons are going to be built fast enough. Then there are not going to be enough people to supervise and to watch those that are in their care, the corrections officers. Even in the state of Mississippi right now, they're having trouble finding corrections officers, people to hire to become corrections officers because of what? The low wages. And as they increase the wages, we find that the correction lobby is one of the strongest lobbies after the, under the defense or military lobbies in this country. And so the juxtaposition or the nexus or the interrelationship or the intersectionality between the two is apparent to anyone who will give it serious thought, knowing that what undergirds all is economics. In the 15th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, picking up our reading at verse number 12, we find the words of our Lord in regard to slavery written. This is what God says: "And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee and serve thee 6 years," not 250, "then in the 7th year thou shalt let him or her go free from thee. And when thou sendest them out free from thee, thou shalt not let them go away empty." No, naughty, naughty, naughty. God is no respecter of person. And God does not know God of capitalism. No. He's not a God of inequality. No. Listen to what God says. "Thou shalt not let them go away empty. Thou shalt furnish them liberally out of thy flock, out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress. Of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto them." Why? Because you got to get a new start. And you don't tell people to go out root hog or die poor as they did in this country, of course, or pull yourself up by your own bootstrap, which has never worked, especially if you don't own any boots, and especially if your boots don't need straps. And so we find that coming from Jump Street, America has been unfaithful, unscrupulous, unethical, and immoral in its imposition and practice of slavery, and in its further practices of discrimination and segregation, and the policies and the practices that were built thereon, the statutes and the laws, the black codes, and all of that milieu of devices, legislative devices that form what we call the structure of racism, since we know that racism is a social structure that does not exist independently of itself in nature, but it exists as a social construct in the politics of this nation in particular. And so we find ourselves in 2020 still fighting the old battles of the haves and the have-nots, and the people that are saying, well, we are better than you are, and you are worse than we are, worse off than we are, and we don't want to be around you. And the laws, the prejudices, personal prejudices, are now institutionalized in the form of laws, customs, social convention, and they infect all of our agencies, public agencies, with which the people of God have to deal with. Women are still fighting for equality, and alas, the black man is still fighting for equality, still fighting to be accepted in the land of his birth. People tell you, go back home. Why don't you go back home? Well, they have somewhere else to go. But the black man in America is at home. He has nowhere else to go. He may have fellowship, and he may have a relationship with the mother continent of Africa, but he can never return there to live, because everything that is owed to the black man in America is owed by America to the black man right here. And it would be foolhardy to leave $20 trillion on the table and go back off to Africa, where you don't have hardly anything, and you'll be starting over from scratch, and then subject to the same colonial powers that held you in bondage over here. Only that once you get over there on the continent of Africa, the colonial powers would have more leeway, freer access to drop bombs on you, use drones to destroy you, have you assassinated, all of those type of things. That's why I never agreed with Elijah Muhammad's desire. And sometime in the past, we heard it even spoken of by Minister Farrakhan. Foolhardy as it is, that the United States would give us 6 or 7 states for our own, only black people. That means all the white folks be around you on the outside, and you be right there in those 6 or 7 states. Why, it would be a turkey shoot. They would destroy you. They would drop bombs on you. They'd cut your water off, cut off your electricity. You'd be in a terrible condition. You think the condition of the ghettos? You only have to look at the condition of the ghettos and the projects and the slums of our cities to see what happened when the power structure, the white power structure, pulls its resources. What's happening to Detroit? What's happening to so many of our great industrial cities that have undergone these transitions from the core of the industrial and the business community moving away, and then the people are left there to fend for themselves with diminishing tax base, eroding tax base, but mounting economic necessities, because the roads still have to be kept open, potholes have to be filled, the trains still have to run on time, teachers have to get paid. You got to have somewhere to work, but the industrial base that provided the working opportunity is not there. So no, you should never talk about such a foolhardy scheme as getting off in some 6 or 7 states, all the Negroes in one place at one time. Please, how foolhardy can one be? And so we are all in this together, because we are all the United States of America. And as they said in the Constitution, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. All the things that followed are concomitant to that, as they said, and we do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Keeping in mind that Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address talked about a new birth. This nation shall have a new birth of freedom. Why? Because that first nation was a divided nation, a nation of slaves and free, a nation of bondage and liberty. And liberty and bondage cannot coexist. It's an absurdity. It leads to a psychosis. And America, many of our American brothers and sisters, as demonstrated by our current and present penchant for keeping the least qualified person of all persons as president of the United States of America in office. And mark my words, he's going to get back in office again. But the point is, it demonstrates that pathology of hatred and animus and hostility that resides in this nation, and that is exploited by the ruling class, those who have the money, those who have the wealth, those who have the resources, those captains of industry, we used to talk about the instruments of production. The people who actually own the instruments of production are using all of the various stratagems, whether they be class or race or gender or even education, in order to exploit the difference, the distance, the divide between the various strata, social strata, and to keep that social strata apart. I always say one of the reasons they assassinated Dr. King was because he was pulling the poor whites from Appalachia with the poor Negroes from Alabama, and the poor Indians was all getting ready to come to Washington, D.C. to begin to protest as one people against the poverty of this nation. See? And that was too advantageous. It was much too much for this country to endure. It was another word I was trying to think of, but it was too ambitious. That'd be a good word. The nation wasn't going to hear of it, and that was one of the underlying reasons why Dr. King was assassinated, was because he saw the bigger picture, that if all of these people who were likewise being victimized by the same system that victimized the Negro, whether you were rich or whether you were poor, if you were a Negro, you still had that stigma of color against you. But if you could pull all of the poor together, and all of those poor should come to Washington, D.C. to make the same appeal, make the same demand. As Dr. King said, we're going to Washington. This time we're not going to leave until we get our check. That's a long overdue check. And America is not about to pay that price. And I have no illusions about reparations. We're going to have a hard fight to get reparations on all fronts. Well-meaning people are not going to be for reparations. And, of course, those who have benefited the most from the status quo are not in any way going to be of any mindset to relinquish some of their authority or powers. Unless you think that I am just whistling Dixie, remember, as we said on last week's broadcast, we were all taught in school that if you get a good education and you work hard and you play by the rules, that everything would work out. But we come to find out that if you work hard, you get a good education, you play by the rules, a lot of times you're going to wind up very bitter. Because people who didn't play by the rules and who didn't work hard and didn't get a good education as you have outstripped you, outsurpassed you in the garnishment or in the accumulation of this world's needs and accumulation of this world's goods. And as I always say, if working hard by itself was a virtue, then every slave coming out of slavery would at least have been a millionaire. Every housewife would be rich, because who works harder than a housewife? Who works harder than a slave? And are they rich? No, they ain't rich. They ain't going to be rich neither. They got industrial injuries, all manner of illnesses and aches and pains, yes. But rich? No. Because the game is stacked against you. And the goalpost is always being moved further and further. And if you say it's this today, then tomorrow is something else. And that is the power of white supremacy. They can just change the rules in the middle of the game, and you got to play to it. And that is what we have been doing down through our generation. I mentioned last week about Professor Professor William Darity and Professor Derek Hamilton and Professor Tricia Rose at Brown University and Duke University, and how they have collaborated in the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America. And they came up with some startling conclusions, some startling discoveries. They found out for people of color, all the right choices don't equal the right outcomes. That means you spend all your money going debt, getting a college degree, a college education, and when you come out of school, you'll saddle with a huge amount of debt that limits your choices, because 6 months after you graduate, you got to begin paying that loan back. And if you haven't found work in your field in those 6 months, and according to the study and according to the research that has been done, not only by these two erstwhile professors, one is the professor of economics and another is the professor of history, but they've worked with sociologists and in going out and conducting tests, sending out resumes to the various corporations, and using ethnic names and then non-ethnic names, ethnic names such as Lakeisha, Laquan, Jamal, and the like. And even though the resumes were impeccable, no response was given. But other resumes that were sent from people with different sounding surnames, mostly white people, those received a callback, received a second call. Some were offered jobs. And what was so startling was that a black person with a college degree and no conviction was less likely to be hired than a white person, male or female, who had dropped out of high school and had a conviction. But they were more likely to be hired than a black person with a college degree. And so the professors came to the conclusion, here it is, education is not the great equalizer when it comes to race and wealth. All right. How education is associated with greater wealth within race groups, but more education will not solve the problem of racial wealth disparity. The financial positions of similarly credentialed black and white families are markedly different. For families with household heads that have a college degree, the typical white household has $180,500 in wealth, while the typical black household has only $23,400 in wealth, a setback of nearly $160,000. Indeed, black families whose head earned a college degree have only 2/3 of the wealth of white families headed by a high school dropout. Moreover, white families whose head completed some college but did not earn a 4-year degree have slightly more wealth than black families with a head that earned a graduate or professional degree. All right? This is not Rev Martin talking. This is the professors talking. I recommend you look at this very telling report. It's a research paper. You know, that's what you pay those people to get, those long-haired people. They go out and get those facts, go out and do the research. And remember, they do cold-blooded statistics, cold-blooded stats in order to buttress. They make those boring charts and graphs. But on those charts and graphs, they chart the difference between black wealth and white wealth. And it comes to see that the richest families in America are now not white. The richest families are actually Japanese, Asian like that, Oriental, Korean, Chinese, and they're at the top, whereas the white person has $355,000 of wealth. The Japanese, Orientals, and the like, they have $465,000 worth of wealth. So they're earning more money and holding on to more wealth than their white counterparts. After their white counterparts, of course, comes the Latinos, the Mexicans, and on the bottom are the blacks. Whereas a white person has maybe $1 of a white person, the black person used to say had 6 cents. Now it's down to 1 cent, and so that's the reality. And those people with those 1 cent and 10 cents and 6 cents, those are college degree people. They're not ignorant. Those are a lot of those are working people. And as I get ready to sign off today, you must remember, God did not condone homelessness. When God sent Adam into the world, and God created Adam, he had a place for him to live. He had something for him to do. He gave him association. He gave him culture. He gave him ethnicity. He gave him civilization, and he was able to talk to somebody every day, and which is quite unlike what we do to our homeless here. They're isolated. They're shunned. They're held in contempt. We don't go to see about them as we should and had ought. And please don't think God's not going to hold that against us, because He does not condone what we do to our brothers and our sisters. As I get ready to wrap up, I wanted to get into the 5 eyes of oppression, but I didn't get into it today. I'll get into it another time. I want to encourage you to continue to pray, to continue to fight, to continue to learn, to expose yourself to as much learning and information as you can that can help us to break out of this trap, this maze that we are caught up in. As Dr. William Barber said last week, I went to hear him, that it's amazing what we can do when we stand up together. When we can stand up together, we can make the Red Sea part. When we stand up together, we can come through the fiery furnace. When we stand up together, we can feed the 5,000. But it's going to take all of us working together, pulling together, speaking together, toiling together, voting together in order to accomplish the things that are before us. They are not overcomable, but we must all work together. As I close again, I say to my working brothers and sisters, regardless of who you are, where you're working, the CEOs making big bank, big buck, they're paying you kibbles and bits. The people in Congress, they get a 55% raise in their salaries overnight in 1 year, but they want you to be satisfied with a 1.5% increase over 5 years. What do they tell you? They don't want to pay you. I'm telling you, you got to start your own business, start your own enterprise, start your own work, labor. Because if they don't want to pay you, listen, don't work for them. Thank you, Doc.
Outweigh my bad days, yes they do. Outweigh my bad days. I just say thank you, Lord.